Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're very lucky today to be joined by Angela Champion. She's CEO of WHITE ROOK Cyber, which is a Queensland-based cybersecurity consultancy and incident response company. And Angela's here today to talk about the sorts of things that we need to be doing as practitioners in advance of a problem, so that we're not trying to effectively solve some very difficult problems when the issue has already arisen. As solicitors, we look at other people's risk and where things have gone wrong in other people's businesses. If we were dealing with an organisation which the sole fire plan was we're not going to have a fire, and they hadn't thought about anything beyond that, we'd be pretty critical of them. What would be your analogy in cybersecurity? Is it something that you need to think well beyond just keeping the bad guys out?
Absolutely. I think if we can take the attitude of prevention rather than cure, and planning up front is really the art form that we're looking for with organisations, rather than trying to deal with everything under pressure during an incident. So the way we work with organisations is really understanding what they've got in place around their business continuity planning, their disaster recovery, their incident response, but more importantly, have they actually exercised those artefacts if they're in place today, and do people know what their roles and responsibilities are?
So in broad terms, business continuity plan is what, and how does it differ from just, the IT guy will turn this stuff back on first? Is that?
It's a really good question. Can I just take a quick segue?
Yes.
So we spend a lot of time stitching IT risk up to business risk, so that it becomes the normal lens of risk around the business, the core focus of what the business is focused on. And then, like any other specialisation, say modern slavery or diversity, cybersecurity becomes part of that lens.
Yep.
So when we're talking about business continuity, we're talking about what are the things that a company needs to factor in the event of an incident. And so whether it be an IT incident and payroll goes down, or invoicing can't be achieved, what are the implications to the business going forward? And taking that thinking right up front and adding cyber into that as well.
Yeah. So in many cases, when a member brings us in the middle of an incident, they're saying, we've got one of the biggest challenges we've ever faced as a practice. We need to be able to communicate with all of these people, and everything's broken. Mm-hmm. So what are the basic steps that a small business could do in advance, so that you can re-establish communications and let people know what you can do and what you can't do for them?
Well, I think understanding what those implications are. So I'd probably add another lens into this and say, what's the business impact analysis? What are the key things for the business that will potentially tear that business down, or slow it down, or prevent it from operating for a period of time, and understanding what that window of time is. So if I go back to not being able to, when we're involved in a recent business continuity planning session with the CFO and all the other key stakeholders, the discussion was around what are the business impacts, what do they look like, who would be responsible to manage through those during that incident, and how long can they survive before the business really gets impacted. So having that discussion up front, whether it be a cyber incident, so a threat actor's come in and carved out a piece of the business, it's really having that discussion around who are the key stakeholders, what sort of questions should they be asking, what sort of roles and responsibilities should be undertaken. Do they have insurance in place? Yeah. Having a look at who's the support mechanism, the specialists that they can talk to and bring in the event of an incident.
If we think through to the evil day for a small business, what sort of impacts are they really going to have to think about, and what sort of problems will you be facing in a practical sense?
Yes. I think fundamentally, if we stay within the planning phase, i.e. do this before the incident actually happens, then everyone can approach this with a calmer mind and a lot more clarity. So the critical thing is to really understand what assets they have, what critical assets they have, such as private information, those sorts of things, and where it resides. I would add in backup, making sure that that's been backed up. But the awareness of what you're actually holding of value and where it's located is key, because in an incident, that is probably one of the number one questions. What's been taken, and what is the value of it? What's the criticality of it? And as soon as that answer is brought to the fore, then people know what the exposure is and what they're dealing with.
And presumably time's of the essence. And if you've got a better understanding, rather than relying on experts to do a forensic report that might take weeks, if you can tell them what was on that drive, you're going to be able to tell your clients much more quickly.
Totally. And again, in the planning phase, or when you're actually setting up your base cyber state, having you may have a third party come in, some independent expert come in and do a current state assessment to give you assistance in mapping where the assets are and what's the risk management requirement and those sorts of things. Again, that would be in a planning phase. That's something that we're really going to be labouring on here, David, in this conversation. That would also help to map out the roles and responsibilities, because the roles and responsibilities may not be just within your small practice. It may be leveraging an independent specialist that you've got as an anointed supplier to help you in the event of an incident as well.
So in the case of a small legal practitioner, then they would be calling the incident response line at Chubb, and Chubb will be putting them in contact with all of the various specialty advisors that they will need. So we don't build the relationship in advance. We basically take who is available at the time, because of course we don't often have any warning that an issue is going to come up. So for the business though, they need to be able to, what sort of questions will the forensics and experts be asking, and what information will you need to be able to hand over, potentially under a fair bit of pressure and at midnight, without delaying things.
Is the question what sort of information?
Yes. What are the experts going to want to know from you, and what can you do in advance to make sure that you can answer that question quickly?
Yeah. Well, again, this gets down to what are your critical assets? What are the assets of value? What assets are containing PII, privacy information, where they're located, and do you have a backup? So having the answers to those questions on the get-go would be key.
Yeah, okay. And I guess there's going to be two aspects of the problem. First of all, there is going to be the core ability just to communicate and do the basics, get into the building and give people calls or give people emails. So what sort of backup systems need to be ready to go so that you can just do those core basics?
So I guess it depends on the environment of the organisation.
Assume small.
Assume small. So the way that the environment has been architected, there needs to be some sort of backup. So if you've got a cloud environment, making sure that you've got cloud backup. If you've got a hybrid environment, making sure that you've got both the physical backup as well as the cloud backed up. That's probably in the planning discussion around how you're actually going to approach the backing up of your environment. And making sure that you're, again, looking at your crown jewels, where are they, understanding how they're being managed for risk, and that would certainly be part of the backup process.
Yeah, okay. And while we're on the topic of backups, I've lost track of the number of small practitioners I've spoken to on day one of the incident, and they tell me, okay, we're backed up, it'll be all right. And then you speak to them on day 4 and they're far less optimistic, and they've realised that first of all, some backups may have failed and they weren't tested. And secondly, that, okay, yes, the information's there, but it might take a very long time to get it back up and actually operational again. Is there anything else that they can do to really speed that along? I know it's very hard because we're talking in an environment where people just don't have a lot of resources in advance. So,
I mean, third party kind of comes to mind on 2 lenses. So you've got third party risk, but also having specialists around you. So as a small practice, you're obviously running a business for a specific purpose. So as a legal practice, you would be surrounding yourself with experts and specialists that can help you make sure that you are secure, that your environment is regularly reviewed so that you have risk assessments and secure cloud architecting and secure cloud assessments going on.
So the days of your nephew just doing it for free is
totally undervalued. Yes, yes.
So you need to have that discussion with the IT person first and just say what's going to happen, when rather than if, and where are the backups going to be, and what do we need to do to test them, and just not assume that it will work on the day.
So we'll probably need to take this back, David, if we may. The actual setup of your environment is really important, and for it to be set up securely. And I think that's probably what we're touching on. Again, plan well and fail early, and know where your risks are. So in your planning cycle, just as you're building your business, you surround yourself with a good legal person, you surround yourself with a good accountant, HR, marketing, all of those pillars to make sure that your business is successful. So as a legal practice, that ecosystem, the importance of that ecosystem still applies, and having specialists that can help you to ensure that your environment is secure is one of the key pieces in ensuring that you've got everything in place in the event of an incident.
So a little bit of early expert advice to tell you how to rebuild the house once it's been burned down is going to save you a lot of money and time if in the unfortunate event that it happens.
Yeah. So one of the key frameworks, industry frameworks in cyber that we reference is Essential 8.
Yes.
And part of Essential 8, they touch on backups, they touch on patching, whether you've got the right fit-for-purpose antivirus for malware management, password management. These are key things that would be better served with a reliable expert in the area of IT and security to help you make sure you've got all that frontline sorted.
Yes. And in terms of the practical ability to communicate, what does an organisation need to do in advance to make sure that they can send out those emails and contact people as they need to?
It's a really good question. I was in an incident response exercise as part of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, which was run by ASA, and I'm part of the Brisbane ASA committee. And as a director in that room, it was really interesting to see the question during the exercise being asked to the directors: how would you respond in the event of an incident? So there was a particular scenario that went down, and what sort of questions do you need to ask? So just like you've asked me, for a legal practitioner, having an understanding of their insurance, who to call, the incident response, if that's part of their insurance, or do they have an existing supplier that offers them a retainer, and how does that work with their existing insurance as well? So I've seen incidents where someone's engaged an incident responder, and then they've talked to their insurer, and their insurer also engages an incident responder, and within the environment you've got two incident responders in there. And they need to very quickly work out who's got prime in that situation. So probably more for the medium to larger practices. It wouldn't be something that a smaller practice would encounter, but these are things to think about.
So in a practical sense, do you think it's a good idea to have a few older laptops that are not kept on the network, and you can plug them back in and try and establish communications? Is that a useful strategy? Or
again, you need to know what risks your environment has, and so having older laptops that aren't kept up to date, which is where patching is a big thing, making sure that patching is regular and that it covers all of your estate. Now, in some instances, there are items that need to be segmented or segregated from the rest of the fleet to contain that risk, and that may be the methodology that's used if those items are too old to be updated.
So in summary, it is useful to have equipment that is clean, that you know it's clean to start, but you can't just plug it straight into the wall because it could easily pick up an infection, and then actually give away information that wasn't stolen the first time round. So it's not a matter of just picking it up and plugging it in. You've got to go through a review and protection process first to bring it up to date.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this also leaps into the third-party conversation from the other lens. So we talked about making sure you've got an ecosystem of specialists that can help you make sure your current state is secure and maintained, but also your third-party suppliers need to be going along that journey as well, because they present a risk if they're integrated into your environment somehow and they get compromised.
Yeah.
Can that bring down a part of your environment?
So for a small legal practice, that would be quite often things like your practice management software, and that has happened. What happens if that gets compromised? How are you going to survive when that's down? And how are you going to communicate with them when all of their clients are going to be on the phone wanting to know exactly the same thing as you? So what is the plan B if you can't?
And you asked that question, we didn't answer it properly from my desk. So what's the communication plan? What are you going to communicate? Who do you need to communicate to? So if and again, this gets back to knowing where your assets are and what's been taken, because that will prioritise if there's a client base that you need to communicate to far more quickly, as opposed to the broader client base. And having the plan of bringing someone in that can help you with your communication, because brand reputation is a big thing in this.
Yes.
I say privileged, but I'm using that in the word of learning a lot and being part of a process where it just went very well. And this is Australian Red Cross, when it was called that, now Lifeblood. And the team there, when that breach went down, they responded very, very well and very, very quickly. They communicated, they were able to build that trust back up. They executed against their plan, and they took everyone on the journey as they were recovering out of it. That was a very, very good outcome.
Yeah. And I guess when you contrast that with other outcomes, usually it's when people are given overly optimistic information first, and then the organisation has to walk it back. And everybody wants to be told, oh, well, it wasn't serious information that was taken and we will be back up and running again in 3 days, so you don't need to worry about your court case. But that burns all of your trust virtually instantly if you give them the wrong information and then have to walk that back later, I'm assuming.
Exactly.
So you really need, as part of the communication plan, not just getting it right, but getting it accurate.
Yes, and constantly maintaining it.
Yeah.
Just like as you're recovering out of that breach, and putting the necessary things in place, that constant communication needs to go out. We saw 3 different breaches happen in recent times. Each one of those came with different communication styles, and I think the first one was, it wasn't a big breach, nothing to see here, and as that unravelled, it was totally not so, and that has, I believe, cost them a lot of impact from a trust and brand perspective. Whereas the others that came out, I think they quickly learned that you've got to talk, and you've got to talk quickly. And as you learn, you share.
So you've mentioned exercises once or twice. Can you elaborate a little bit what you mean by that?
Yes, and it's actually a really important thing that I think is undervalued, although from the point of our organisation, we're getting an increasing demand for it. So we talked about Essential 8, or any of the basic frameworks. Let's say having something in place allows you to have the layers, and 85% of the cybersecurity breaches, they say, by having the Essential 8 in place, it can be reduced and mitigated. Exercising it's part of the cyber resilience or digital resilience program at an organisation, and you do not have to be big to do this. It is basically an opportunity to look at the various scenarios. So we talked about the business impact analysis and the business continuity plan, and what are the things that could impact the business and stop it from operating. Putting those into scenarios, and then having the key stakeholders in the room actually go through the exercise of feeling and being in an incident. And when we run these with our specialist consultants, you really can get the time pressure and the urgency into that forum to help people, work under a pressured environment and see what decisions come out of it and debrief. So it's having that opportunity to actually exercise your incident response plan. One of the things, David, that I think is undervalued is people identify who their incident responders are, hopefully, in that planning phase, but everyone has a role to play. And so everyone should have some knowledge about, in the event of an incident, what do I need to do? So those exercises can be very valuable to expand from not just the incident response team to across the company and make it part of your training. And that then rolls into having security awareness and having cyber resilience and we've, doing a whole lot of things to keep people current and engaged on preserving the valuable assets of the organisation and their own assets as well.
So I guess the analogy for a small business is you don't wait until the room's full of smoke before you find out where the fire door is.
Exactly.
And we will be releasing a checklist for the kinds of things that you might like to think about in your organisation, and that will just be in the notes to this video. So things like, what do people do when their screen first goes blue and the message comes up that they've been hacked? Do you leave the computer on? Do you unplug it? What's that very first line? Leading up to the what will be the communication plan, and I guess the word that keeps coming out is plan rather than ad hoc. So communication plan, business resilience, what do you need to do to get back up and make sure that you don't lose $500,000 in negligence claims because you were dark for 3 days and settlements didn't happen or claims didn't go through in court.
Exactly. And the plans are IT linked into business. So if we talk disaster recovery or incident response, in some organisations they kind of can be clustered together. That incident response plan, which should be reviewed to the current appetite of the organisation, will have a set of playbooks, and those playbooks are being, they should be regularly exercised so that people know who to do what with whom when in the event of an incident happening. Communications, responding to media, responding to clients, making sure the backups are up, all the technical requirements, etc.
So in terms of a formal fire drill process, using outside consultants, what would be the sort of size of an organisation where you should really start to think about resourcing that?
I think it gets down to if you're an organisation that's holding valuable data, personal information.
In the case of a law firm, that's all of them. So, it might be 3 people and their cat working out of their mum's basement, literally. So we all have very confidential information, potentially information can get people killed if it's released in the wrong year.
And I'll expand on that, because even our own data, some people sit here and go, well, look, I don't have high value. But when we do the security awareness sessions, we run them with our security offensive ethical hackers. And the reason why we do that is they will casually take all of staff through an awareness session, and they demonstrate how the company can be vulnerable, but also how the individual's social media can create a vulnerability. So again, this gets down to everyone as an individual, not to be afraid, to be informed, and to have the basic hygiene in place on a regular basis. And just put it in as part of the planning. What do I need to do? When do I need to do it? How regularly do I need to do it? Because it is programmatic. Try to get that uptick from level 1 maturity up to level 3, where things are consistently maintained across the business to hit the risk objectives. That's key.
Well, thanks very much, Angela. I know that this will be of enormous value to our members because it's so distressing for them when they're trying to solve these problems, when the problems have already happened. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, David. It's been quite a journey.